Welcome to the Conquerors Podcast. My name is Manish, and as per use, I have Jeff Goodnow with me. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Peachy Keen, brother.
Peachy Keen. Today we're going to talk about something that most compliance officers would tell you not to talk about. Um,
True
but we're
that.
not most people, and we feel like you're better off making these decisions or these announcements with some transparency versus hiding things in the disclosure, which a lot of asset managers tend to do. So what that means is we're talking about a touchy subject called benchmarks. And the title of this podcast is Blowing Up the Benchmarks, because we're kind of taking that approach. We finally feel free, happy, excited about taking a bazooka to what we think is a stupid process in our industry and doing what we think makes the most sense. So first and foremost, Jeffrey, what is a benchmark?
Yeah, so I think it's always good to go back to the basics, right? If we look at Investopedia, I'm actually going to read this very short and simple definition. A benchmark is a standard or measure that can be used to analyze the allocation, risk, and return of a given portfolio. I was shocked. Like, that's so simple. I love it. Simple.
And so,
Now, the
go
reality.
ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So the reality is, right? We have something that is very simple by definition. What do most people do? They look at the S&P 500 when they get home at night and turn on the TV at news, right? Or they have that conversation. They just want to know what the market did. Well, that really means, what did the S&P do? What have we done as an industry? Totally the whole process. Let's put 5, 6 benchmarks together in some combination to match our portfolio. That's kind of become the industry standard. It's a cluster. Nobody knows what they're really putting together.
And
So,
to that point, let's talk about Potomac and our
yeah,
history
absolutely.
and how this has evolved.
Yeah.
So
I know you've got a story, so let's fire away,
for
man.
for years and years, we have used the S&P 500 for our benchmark. That has been the industry standard, and everything is measured against that. For instance, something like beta is measured against it. And so we've always felt, look, let's just use a market proxy, which the S&P 500 is probably the best out there for a broad market. I can make the argument there's better, but there's history on the S&P, so a lot of people use it. Here's what happened years ago. A lot of advisors would complain, clients as well. They'd say, look, you're a risk manager, you're a tactical manager. How can an income program be measured to the S&P 500? How can a balanced equity program be measured to the S&P 500? And as a tactical manager, we always felt, look, we can go in and out. We can be 100% invested or 0% invested. What do we do? And we always just measure to the S&P 500, and that caused a lot of issues. And so, we decided to make some changes years ago and create custom benchmarks. So you did some digging around, and this kind of opens Pandora's box in not a good way when you start customizing benchmarks. And we learned a lesson on that. But first and foremost, I want to ask you, when you, as the OCIO here, you see a lot of managers, and therefore you see a lot of benchmarks,
Right.
because there's no standardization. What popped out at you when you do your job?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is, it's one thing to review, let's say, an individual manager. Same thing could be said about reviewing an individual mutual fund or an individual product of any kind. Okay, that particular thing has a benchmark. That company has decided maybe it's 1 indice, 2 indices, 5 indices put together to make their benchmark. Okay, we could say maybe that's reasonable. In my role and in our function as OCIO and a multi-strategist TAMP, the idea is to put multiple models together, right? So that you end up with a better combination, essentially an optimized combination for the client's overall experience. However, let's say you put 3 models together. Whatever the ratio, doesn't really matter. From a reporting standpoint and a diligence standpoint, all of a sudden you end up having, if each one of those has 3 or 4 or 5 different benchmarks to match up with their product, you put the 3 products together, suddenly you have 3 things you've talked to the client about, and I don't even have enough fingers and toes to count how many benchmarks suddenly appear on a report. It's beyond ridiculous when you realize or take that perspective to it. So I'm going to point out another little flaw here in this process, and that is, Look, you and I, you talked about our benchmarks. We've had issues in the past trying to figure out, like, hey, our products, some of them are, 2 decades old, 3 decades old, right? There weren't a lot of indices back then, so you have to pick things that were, around back then. I'm going to give you an example of a particular product. I won't throw them under the bus. I'm not going to name them by name. But here is one example of a benchmark combination for a particular SMA product, right? An advisory solution. Essentially, it's for this particular model, it was 46% MSCI All Country World Index, 46% Barclays U.S. Ag Bond. Okay, that's not too bad. 6% HFRX Global Hedge Fund Index, and 2% Barclays U.S. 1 to 3 month Treasury. Now, 2 or 3 of those you probably know, but just to give you an idea, I think this is funny, and it's worth the 30-second read, because here's what did anybody know what the HFRX Global Hedge Fund Index is? It's actually,
I do, but
yeah. Well, so just think about this in perspective. What we're trying to teach clients and use as benchmarks. This is designed to be representative of the overall composition of the hedge fund universe. It is comprised of all eligible hedge fund strategies, including but not limited to convertible arbitrage, distressed securities, hedge fund or equity hedge, equity market neutral, event-driven, macro merger arbitrage, and relative value arbitrage. The strategies are asset weighted based on the distribution of assets in the hedge fund industry. I need oxygen after that. I mean, okay, so it's only 6%, but I guess the point is, you end up with all these esoteric things thrown into this pile of crap. And when I was abbreviating benchmarks, right, I used BM, and I thought, that's really appropriate because it's basically full. These are full of shit as a bowel movement. So, in the scheme of things, we need to keep it simple. That's what Potomac is trying to do.
So
yeah.
I think, hold on. So here's a dilemma that sometimes is out of your control, and that comes down to the software people use. For example, when you run proposals or when you run fact sheets or whatever it is, certain software solutions only have access to certain benchmarks because it's very expensive to get it. And then your portfolio management system might have access to a different set of benchmarks. And a lot of times you're going back and trying to match and mix and match. And I don't think we're blaming managers per se. We understand it's a challenge. You're trying, especially if you're not bland, passive, you're trying to figure out how in the world can we create a benchmark. And frankly, I'm not really even sure that we've answered that question with our new release coming up. But but here's what we did. So I want to, before we go there, I want to once again tell a story. Go ahead.
Let me add. Hold on, Manish. I want to say, maybe you don't agree with what our solution will be, but at least it's simple.
Fair enough, but look, so you just
That's my statement.
You just threw managers under the bus for creating custom benchmarks. And for full disclosure, we did the same thing.
Absolutely.
A couple of years ago, when we were pushed about, why are you benchmarking tactical to the S&P 500, we said, okay. So we went back and we had a process in place. We said, let's go look at the percentage of time we spend in cash. Let's go look at the percentage of time we buy international versus domestic, bonds, international versus domestic. And let's come up with benchmarks for our strategies that are more reflective of the tactical nature. When we were done, we were happy. And as we kept growing and looking at it, we were just like, this is like, there's no... It's not a strong process where you can bring any manager into the mix or create new strategies and apply something to it. It wasn't really, there was still too much subjectivity. And although we aren't totally disappointed with it, we also weren't totally happy with it. And with that being said, we decided to, let's rip the Band-Aid off. And what we mean by that is, because we are adding more and more managers, and you hit the nail on the head earlier, 3 managers times 4 benchmarks each. How do you explain that? Let's create a simple process that anyone can understand, and no matter the style of management you offer, you will fit a bucket.
Yep.
What do you have to say? What do we do?
Yeah, well, at first, we needed to make sure that there was no subjectivity, right? We wanted a process that in creating the benchmark itself for each of 5 categories, that there was a process in place. And for us, that first determining factor was to use max drawdown. Now, yes, we are a risk manager. I look, full disclosure, right? Clearly, we understand max drawdown, and we've talked about that before. But we felt like that is at least a statistic that doesn't change. You can't hide from it. It's a known entity if you have the right software to be able to see what this is for all these different strategists and models and securities and so forth. And so if we can make something that is consistent with these 5 categories, then it doesn't matter whether you first are looking at a single solution or you combine multiple things together to get a combination. The end result is you look at what the max drawdown is, that tells you what bucket it's in, and the bucket has the benchmark. It's a very simple comparison.
And so the cool thing with max drawdown, and we love it, and we've been vocal about max drawdown, is the fact that we've always told people if an investment has incurred a max drawdown in the past, you can bet your ass that it's going to incur it at some time in the future.
Yeah,
and so things like standard deviation can be skewed by upside or downside volatility. There's every risk statistic out there has flaws. We think that max drawdown does not have any flaws, and it's the most purest form of identifying risk in a portfolio. And so that's what we wanted to back into and say, look, let's benchmark strategies based on the risk that they've incurred in the past as a proxy. Now, you said there's no subjectivity, and there isn't. We may face some struggles with a new strategy that comes on board, but typically we don't approve strategies that don't have a track record, so that won't be a problem for us. And this is the reason why other TAMPs can't do this, because they don't have track records that go back far enough if they have their own in-house manager, and they approve strategies that have a 1-year track record. And this kind of stuff won't work for that, right? So the bullshit meter gets higher and higher when you start creating these esoteric benchmarks. So let's just be clear here. There's going to be 5 buckets, and within those 5 buckets, it will be a combination of 2 indexes, either the S&P 500 or the Barclays Ag, and a percentage of each of those will be allocated based on max drawdown. So, on that, let's back into that. On the high end, you're looking at probably 100% of the S&P 500, and on the low end, you're looking at probably 10 to 20%, right? And then in between will be broken out, and we'll have more information on it. But the point is, everything, whether it's income or alternatives or buy and hold or tactical, it doesn't matter. It will be matched to a risk benchmark based on max drawdown and based on 2 indices that everyone knows about, and the data is readily available.
Yeah, I think it's good too to understand the buckets, right? And perhaps we can create a graphic to throw up here when we're before we release the video. But essentially, it's 5 simple buckets, and when we're looking at the maximum drawdown, it's essentially 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, and then 40 to 50 plus, right? So again, whether you're looking at one particular strategy or security, or you're looking at some really cool combination that you love, there's statistically a max drawdown for that. That's easily, if you have the right software, is easy to calculate, and boom, it drops into the bucket. You compare it to that index combination. So we just think it's a super simple way to be consistent. And guess what? Harkening back to what you said in the beginning, even we did for 20 plus years, use just the S&P for everything. So the S&P is a big marker here, and the S&P and the U.S. Ag are really kind of the 2 predominant players when you look at across the board what people know, regular clients know, and also what everybody sees and understands. So let's just use that. Going back to simple.
And we went through an exercise of trying to figure this out, and as you're working on different managers and add them to the mix, it became confusing. And one of our favorite quotes, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, is perfection is achieved when there's nothing else to take away, not adding more shit. And so we've always said, if we can keep it simple, the story is simple, the benchmarks are simple, and you can explain it to a client, there's comfort level all around. And we just saw too many proposals where we would look down and it would say benchmark, and we'd go down to the bottom and we'd think to ourselves, what the actual fuck is this? There's like 7 different benchmarks, percentages all over the place, 46.4, 2.5. Nothing made sense. And so that was our goal when you and I sat down and said, we have to simplify this, not just for our sanity, but so clients understand what they're getting into. And I think we achieved that. There's going to be blowback. You can't make everyone happy. We stopped giving a shit about making everyone happy a long time ago. But and we'll take it. You know, if there's blowback, we'll take it and we'll explain it over and over, and we'll send this video to them because frankly, we did it for transparency, for simplicity, and for explainability. And that's it. So let's wrap this up. I think this explains it all well. What's your recommendations this week?
Yeah, so my recommendation is going to be kind of a throwback. Look, a lot of people may have seen this in the past. I know this goes to Maryland, but there's an old HBO series that's still available on HBO Max called The Wire. It's one of the first
Hey, hold on.
series.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to interrupt you because full disclosure,
fire away.
Jeff and I work on a notebook before the podcast, so we prepare. And so I saw this recommendation, and I'm like, dude, this is like recommending people drink water. Everyone and their mother has seen The Wire. Like, this is not something new.
Not I.
And but apparently Jeff hasn't. So yeah,
No.
Recommend away, Bubba.
Yeah, well, I do what I can, right? I mean, it's you can pay for it on Prime, but if you got HBO Max, you should be able to just do a search and find it, and it's like 5 or 6 seasons. So, look, one of the things I find kind of cool about doing throwback recommendations is it's fun to watch. I think this came out like the first season was like 2002 or something. I don't know. You might have been 6 years old. And when it's that old, what you end up seeing is a whole bunch of actors and actresses that maybe they weren't necessarily prominent then, but they've gone on to do other things. Like one of the characters is the boss for the Jack Ryan movies with John Krasinski, right? I mean, it's like, oh, okay, wait a second. Here he is, clear back then doing this other thing. So I enjoy that sort of thing. Watching some of the old movies, old series and so forth. So I thought I'd throw it out there, something different. What do you got?
That's awesome. Yeah, The Wire's highly recommended. So absolutely, if you haven't seen it, check it out.
It's a
great show.
We should probably add, just for clarity, right? It's basically a crime drama, so it's all about the drugs, the narcotics, the wire, right? You think about, that sort of thing. So at least now you know what it is as you go to the recommendation. So fire away, man.
Cool. We started using something called HelloFresh recently, just for a couple boxes a week, and essentially it's a meal delivery kit
not Hello Kitty.
No, HelloFresh. Wow, your jokes are so bad, dude. Somebody needs to beep you out. All right, so HelloFresh, Jesus Christ, it's a meal delivery system where you get a couple meals a week, and it comes boxed up. Most people know this by now, probably. And all the ingredients are pre-bagged, so you don't waste anything. And I love cooking, and so to me, this is kind of a cop-out, but at the same time, I can feel for my wife who's taking care of 4 kids while I'm at work and having to put meals together. It's pretty simple to be able to have the recipe in front of you, have everything pre-portioned, have the seasonings pre-portioned, and throw it together. So HelloFresh, there's a ton of free codes out there if you want to try it for a week. I think it's worthwhile for people who are busy professionals or have too many damn kids.
Yeah, Manish, I'm actually going to back you up on that because although we can't order that now, when we were in our apartment getting ready to RV, we had one of our neighbors was going to be going on vacation. They totally forgot, and their shipment for HelloFresh was already on its way. And so they basically just said, hey, guys, do me a favor. Watch out on Tuesday. There's going to be a box delivered. Take it and eat the stuff. And there were several meals in there, and they were all really good. So I was impressed. I think it's a good recommendation.
Good stuff.
Yeah, good recommendation.
All right, that's all we got. Blowing up the benchmarks. Hopefully there's a lot of volcano and grenade images that Martina can throw up here.
Yeah, like the new click to subscribe and ring the little ringy bell dingy thingy. By the way, that was actually something I gave a shout out. I want to add this. I gave a shout out to my friend Mike from the Dry Campers because he always says the ringy bell dingy thingy. And I realized I did that on the podcast, and I did it backwards, and I did the dingy bell ringy thingy. So it's almost like who's on first, does it matter? But I still love the phrase.
I have zero clue what you're talking about. So on that note, have a good week, day, wherever you see this, folks. YouTube, smash the like button, subscribe, leave comments, show us some love. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks.